Welcome to Covenant of Justice. I'm attorney Isaiah Jerez, and every other week we sit down with remarkable individuals of Southern Nevada who make this such a wonderful place to live. Together, we explore a wide range of topics that matter to the people of Las Vegas and beyond, offering a glimpse behind the glamour of the Strip to showcase the real stories, experiences, and voices that shape our community. So we got here today Lieutenant Cody Fulwiler from the Traffic Division, and then Officer Mike Teel. And my question for you guys is, like, how do you end up in traffic in Las Vegas? How did your career head towards that direction?
So, kind of answering, like we were talking about earlier, both Officer Teel and myself were explorers here for Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, starting at the age of 16, and that goes till 21. It's volunteer, but you learn how to be a police officer. You go on ride-alongs. You do competitions in different parts of the U.S. Against other agencies across the U.S. So we did that, and then we both were in the same academy at age 21, so kind of unique in that aspect. So went through the same academy, and then after the academy, you go into field training. And he went a different direction. I'll let him talk about his direction that he went. But for me, from there, I went to field training actually in this part of town in the Southeast Area Command, and then over into Downtown Area Command. I rode motorcycles, so in our traffic bureau here for the Metropolitan Police Department, we ride motorcycles. So I rode motorcycles since I was about 11, 12 with dirt bikes, and then expanded on to street bikes and riding street bikes. I did watch reruns of Chips, legitimately did. Actually, it was on before I would go to high school, and I'd always watch it. There was that definitely in there too, of Ponch and John. But I went to a radar class, so you had to get radar certified. It wasn't part of our academy training.
And you're talking about radar, like a speed radar?
Speed radar, yeah. And so there was 3 officers that were there that were in our traffic unit at the time riding motorcycles, and they asked the question, hey, who here rides motorcycles? And I raised my hand, and they're like, okay, you got to come to traffic. And I'd never thought about it, honestly, because I was, besides Chips, I watched TJ Hooker, too, so another show, and wanted to catch the bad guys and do all that fun stuff. And I hadn't really thought about it. And so we have a program, and still do, before you can go into motor school, called the Safe Rider class. And so I got on that, and you ride the Harleys that we have. And once I did that, I was just hooked. I have to come. And so after that, you have a testing process that involves an oral board, which is like an interview in front of a sergeant and 2 motor officers at the time. And got on the list, and then eventually transferred up to our traffic unit, and was a motor officer for about 7 years. 5 of that 7 years was on graveyard, and the other a little bit on day shift and then on swing shifts. And then figured out that I wanted to be a sergeant, and so for our department, you have to leave units when you promote, and I thought the best thing was to get a little bit more broader experience on the department. So I left to be an FTO, so I was a field training officer over in the northeast part of town, Northeast Area Command, and then got promoted to sergeant and did a few things, some investigative units, and back to patrol. And then I was like, you know what? I want to come back as a sergeant in traffic. So I did. So I came back as a sergeant and was a sergeant in traffic about 3 years. And then decided I wanted to promote to lieutenant. So I promoted lieutenant out of traffic, and then went to our Bolden Area Command, which is down in the middle part of our town, the historic west side. I was a lieutenant there for about 3 years. And there was an opening in traffic for the lieutenant position. And decided to come back. So I just truly enjoy it. I truly enjoy the impact, besides riding a motorcycle, the impact that we have on the community. And you see it every day. Families just absolutely destroyed in a fatal collision. Not just one person, but a whole family. And then not only just that, but what happens afterwards, and the families, how it affects each and every single one of those people that are involved in those people's lives. And we have an impact on that, whether it's enforcement or intervention, which I'll let Mike talk about too, or Officer Teel. It's just amazing to see how big that is of an impact. And in comparison to other major cities, last year our fatalities were 161 in our jurisdiction.
Just in
Metro.
So you're talking about Las Vegas and the county.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we're unique in that aspect. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department consolidated in 1973. The City of Las Vegas Police Department and then Clark County Sheriff's Department consolidated. So we are both. So we're unique in that. But in our jurisdiction last year it was 161. When you look at other major metropolis cities, Dallas and bigger cities that are kind of comparable to us, and they're in the mid to high 200s to 300s. And so 161, it's a number, but those are lives that are not here today, and we would love it to be zero, ultimately, but we're definitely fewer than those major metropolises. So we're in the right direction, but our sheriff this year has said 125 or less, and so we're working at that. And right now we're at 85. So
pretty high
in comparison, right? So we want to keep it reduced for sure. But I'll pass it over to Officer Teel, talk about his experience and how he came here.
Yeah.
So we had different sides. I never rode a motorcycle before wanting to go to traffic. I grew up, like I said, I was born and raised here. My parents were absolutely against ever being on a motorcycle, even though I wanted to experience it when I was a kid, and they were like, absolutely not. You're never doing it, so don't think about it. So I stayed in patrol for 12, almost just shy of 12 years. I worked in field training in the northeast part of town, then I went over to the northwest, and then transferred to, it was southwest at the time, but now is the Enterprise Area Command. With that area command is now divided into 3 area commands. We patrolled it as one. And I love patrol. I love the uniform. I became a cop to be the noticeable uniform. That was just, I was born and raised here. Metro was the agency that you wanted to go work for. And after October 1st, I was the entry team to the shooter's room. I also was on the field looking for survivors. I wanted to change. I was like, I want to change. I've been almost 12 years in patrol. Maybe it's time to do something different. I had gotten a motorcycle license. I was riding, and I said, hey, why not? Let's go to traffic, because I always had a traffic dominance with my role in patrol. I always liked doing traffic enforcement and as a patrol officer as well. And so I went to test for Safe Rider, realized that riding a motorcycle in a police fashion was totally different than riding a motorcycle out in the street, because the things that we are able to do on a motorcycle, I could never think that I could do as a citizen without getting trained. So it took me twice to be able to come to traffic and test for that. I came to traffic in December of 2017. Quickly realized I love it, the passion. We formed the first ever multi-jurisdictional DUI strike team in October of 2018, and I was on that team. We're working with NHP at the time and us, and didn't realize the DUI problem that we actually had. We knew we had DUIs, but being solely focused in and seeing it, when we arrested 100 DUIs in the first month with just 5 units out there working, it was an eye-opening experience. But the first time in my career that I could say that we actually helped solve or reduce a problem was the DUI strike team. It was from October to October of 2018 to 2019, we helped reduce DUI fatal collisions by almost 66% in that first year. And it was an amazing feeling, because you saw it and you were able to really say what you were doing to help impact. So that's where I developed my passion for the DUI side of stuff. Shortly after 2020, I went to our problem-solving unit, which was the same type of work, but it was different hours, but it was mainly focused in on more heavy enforcement areas, not just DUIs, but tickets, the writing of citations and the DUI enforcement, but also community engagement. And then I was asked to take over the role of the traffic intervention officer in 2022, and I've been there ever since, and that has been a very rewarding part. I've been able to help formulate the department and getting training for officers and creating different programs, and also the DUI intervention program for the department as well. So
yeah, talk about fulfillment, right? When you can see those numbers and you see those lives that you saved, right, with that DUI intervention, right? And it's a matter of just being on the street, recognizing it, looking for it, and then to go back and say, okay, yeah, like we saved someone.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get to say, you can look at the problem, and say, that's what we did, and we can actually say, what do we do different to solve it or reduce it? And that's the only thing at that time is what we did, and it was an amazing feeling.
And so a couple of things you brought up, and so and maybe Lieutenant can talk about this as well. So some of the things that you can do as an officer on the motorbike, or maybe some of the things that they train you that just the general public can't do. What are some of those things?
So for our all the motor officers for our department, and also correct me if I'm wrong here because some things has changed slightly, Officer Teel, but school police, North Las Vegas does go through our motor school as well. I believe the city marshals now have gone through it. Henderson still goes through ours as well.
And
So-
university.
And the university, that's correct. University police also. They all go through our motor school, and there are instructors from those agencies as well that also are included with our department too. But the motor school, you know, the running joke with our department is there's SWAT school and there's motor school, and both are super intense. There are many people that do not pass motor school, and they don't make it. The reason for that, we put extremely high standards because you're out on that motorcycle, you know, at least 40 hours a week, if not more, with overtime. Excuse me. And you're on that bike, you know, on a 10-hour shift, and you're doing enforcement, speed enforcement. You're riding around during heavy traffic times. We also are one of the fewer agencies that have 24/7 motor officer coverage. So that means graveyard. So they're riding, you know, out there during graveyard times when there seem to be more DUIs out there on the roadways, and also the elements. So the heat of Las Vegas, and people always think about the heat, but it's also super cold on graveyard. Trust me, after 5 years on graveyard, we do have some electric jackets and heated grips now on the new bikes, but it's still cold. I mean, it gets down into the you know, mid to low 20s. When you're riding a motorcycle, it's actually about 10 degrees, you know, with the wind chill. But the motor school consists of 4 weeks, and in that 4 weeks, the first 3 weeks, you're doing different cone patterns, and those cone patterns are mirroring Northwestern Motorcycle Academy, basically, or their university, and they are geared towards being able to control that motorcycle. Knowing how to maneuver it in and out and around of traffic, whether it's a collision scene or going after a speeding violator, whatever it might be. And also included in that motor school that's different than other motorcycle riding or classes that civilians have. Those are in the controlled environment, right, and at lower speeds. In motor school, they take them out onto the roadway, and they're riding and pair riding because we do ride in pairs. Another one of the things that motor officers are, I hate to say tasked with, but the responsibilities are, is when there's a fallen officer, right? And we see that sadly more frequently now, and we're riding all together, right? And it takes a lot of skill because a lot of times it's in slower speeds, and we have to have control of that motorcycle. So pair riding or riding in a group riding is part of motor school as well, and riding throughout the valley. And that's something that you won't see in a private type of class that they put on. And then at the end of that 3 weeks, there's a riding test, and you have to attain, I believe it's 70% or better. It might have changed to 75%. But you have to get that score. And if you don't pass, and you get put back into a car until you can pass. And there's been a few people that they haven't passed, and they've had to go back to patrol. But we have some of the absolute best instructors. The things and the ways that they can ride motorcycles are absolutely mind-boggling. And even more important is their instruction capabilities, because you can be a great motorcycle rider but not able to teach somebody, and you're teaching some folks, like Officer Teel said, that have never ridden a motorcycle before. Not only not ridden a motorcycle, now you're going to ride a motorcycle that says police on it, that you're going to be doing enforcement. And these are enforcement where people, just the other day someone went past me at 110. So if you're going 110, in order for me to catch up to you, I got to do at least 130 to catch up to you. So you're riding motorcycles at high speeds, but you have to be able to do it safely to catch these violators that we're hoping that we can get off the street, or at least cited, that are preventing those fatalities or the critical injury collisions from occurring. So after that 3 weeks and passing that, there's an additional week, and that additional week does more city riding, and then also the tactics, because we're doing vehicle stops off of a motorcycle rather than in the academy we learn in a car or an SUV now that we utilize the Explorer, and shooting from the motorcycle platform or around the motorcycle platform, doing more tactics off the bike and how to approach people, and there's been protests and things like that, how we're handling those type of situations. So there's even more training on top of that, because there's being a police officer and then there's being a motor officer, and that motorcycle, although it's a great tool, can also be cumbersome, and you need to know how to separate yourself from it sometimes to be the most safe, because there's not as much cover on that motorcycle as there a vehicle is. So, so after all that, those 4 weeks, then you go to a squad, and then on that squad there's a MTO, a motor training officer, and you ride with that motor training officer for 4 weeks. They normally swap after 2 weeks to a different training officer, and they're looking at those riding capabilities, assisting with that, the enforcement, and then also the training, because with our department, a traffic bureau and the motor officers are the only ones that do collision investigation. Our patrol officers do not do collision investigation. So that's why they're so passionate about it. They dive into the collisions and get even more involved with it, but they're making sure that they can do those investigations appropriately, because in our academy, that's not part of it. That training isn't part of our academy, so that's why they want to make sure it's even better ingrained. So after all that, then they're full-fledged and then go out and they're on their own.
Yeah, and that's amazing, all that training and all that, I guess, mentoring and coaching along the way. And I heard the stat, I'm not sure if it's correct, but the mortality rate of people that use motorcycles for commuting is like 40% within like 5 years, right? Versus like you're talking about in traffic, you're on the motorbike 40 plus hours a week.
And I think a big part of that is training. Like, think about how many people, and we see it on a daily basis, when a lot of these fatal collisions that we have, a lot of these riders do not have an M endorsement. They've never gone through formal training. They, started growing up and they got a motorcycle and they just started riding. They're self-taught. I mean, we all remember growing up when we rode bikes. What did they tell us about the front brake? Don't use it. You touch it, you're going to go over the handlebar. Well, that was something I was taught as a bike rider, and so when I went into motor school, the first thing they're telling us, hey, use your front brake. I'm like, what are you talking about? Wait. That means I'm going to go that way. And then you learn that the front brake is actually the better brake, and when you properly learn how to apply both brakes together and not mash on the brakes and not just completely snatch it, you realize the control is much better. And that's some of the issues that we see with the riders within our city, is they're self-taught. They're not somebody that uses what the advantage of the bike has and the technology, or they aren't the most proficient rider because they just used to ride to commute, and they do using it to save gas. They're using it to be a cheaper mode of transportation, which is great, because that's one reason why I originally got my first bike. I was driving 40 minutes to work because I lived in Deep Henderson and I wanted a cheaper mode of transportation. But it was also now seeing where I was to what the skill level I have now. Wow, unbelievable on the side of seeing things of what is safe riding and what is just doing it because I want to ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Officer Teel really hit it on the head there, and there's a lot of classes and organizations. I mean, you can Google it and find them within the valley, but any training is better than the self-taught training. The biggest thing when we look at motorcycle collisions, and we just had one yesterday that we went out to, that was a critical injury, is braking. Anybody can ride super fast in a straight line for the most part, but being able to appropriately brake, and the key there is appropriately brake, will prevent either the collision from occurring or a 45-mile-an-hour collision being 5 miles an hour, or if you're going faster. And that is the absolute key to motorcycle riding, is braking. And one of the things in our motor school, we have what we call a brake and escape, and then a 180 decel, and those both you're going 45 miles an hour and you have to brake, and then lights get tripped and you have to make an avoidance on the brake and escape. On the other one, it's a 180 decel. You're braking and making several maneuvers and eventually a right U-turn. And those are really two very, very key training components to motor school, because they're incorporating that braking and emergency braking, but it has to be done right. And now bikes have advanced in technology. There's ABS, but when I went through motor school, I was on a Harley that had no ABS. So you very quickly found out that you were doing inappropriate braking because the bike started to go down.
Yeah,
So,
from going 45 miles per hour.
after going
Yeah.
45 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So, and you find out that rear brake is only a little bit, and you know, most people, they learn how to drive a car. So they're used to using their foot to brake, and they jam on that rear brake, and all that does is cause fishtail and actually extends your braking distance. And that's what we see more often than not in the motorcycle collisions. It could have been avoided. Yes, maybe the motorcycle was going too fast, or maybe the vehicle did pull out in front of them because they can't see. But if they would have had appropriate braking, it wouldn't have happened, or it would have been a very low speed collision. So that's the frustration when we see it, especially as motorcycle riders. We have that training, we know, and we see it, and it's like, boy, this could have been avoided. It truly could have been.
I want to ask about kids and bikes, right? Because a lot of times it's the same thing, right? This could have been avoided. And, you know, one of the, just internally at my house, right? My wife and I think it's safer when my kids are riding in the neighborhood to not ride on the sidewalk, because I see so many times where kids are riding on the sidewalk and they're crossing the street, and a person coming behind them either isn't paying attention or thinks that the kid's going to stop, and then turns right as soon as the kid comes off of the sidewalk, and then gets hit. And I don't know what the solution is for that, right? Because if the kid's riding on the street, he's going to have the right of way to continue to go straight. Since he's riding on the sidewalk, maybe he loses the right of way. But for kids, you know, you're talking about, let's say boys, right? These boys that have all this testosterone in their mind, they're getting on the bike, they're just so excited. Like, what could we do as a community to help avoid those collisions? Because I see it so many times. Kids are coming off the sidewalk, even professional drivers, bus drivers turn right and hit the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll touch on a little bit, and then I'll pass it off to Teel, but it's a hard one to answer, and I think the biggest thing is as a parent myself, teaching our kids the right way to ride, and that there is a difference, that when you're on the roadway, you are following all the rules of the road. When it comes to crosswalks, you have to be off the bike and walking it, and there's a reason for that. And the biggest thing is too, and telling my kids, people just expect them not to pay attention, right? We live in a day and age with cell phones, with pretty much a whole tablet as your car screen, music blaring, kids screaming in the back, and things like that. And you just have to expect them to not see you, and you have to be paying attention for that. If you're riding on the sidewalk, same thing. There's pedestrians that are using the sidewalk, and kids are going to be kids, and we as a community have to understand that too. And kids aren't going to do the right thing sometimes because they are kids. And as a driver, and we talked about this recently in a traffic symposium with the city, we all have to mutually respect each other on the roadway, and that goes a long way. And adults have to understand that you're an adult, and that kids are going to make those mistakes. And we try to teach our kids the best that we can, but at the end of the day, like you said, their testosterone is high, or little girls. I saw just the other day, a little girl was on her roller skates. She's just roller skating across the thing, almost got hit. Car wasn't paying attention. She had her headphones on, and I just blared on my horn. I wasn't working, and thank goodness it made her look up, and then the car just passed by her. And kids are going to be kids, and we just have to pay more attention when we're driving. We do, especially now with all the distractions that are out there, because it's not so much that this person is bad when they hit somebody. It's they made a critical mistake, and now this person got hit, or this juvenile got hit, and there's nobody that wants to hit a kid, right?
Yeah.
And if you can eliminate those distractions as much as possible, it's going to help you and prevent those from happening, especially for those professional drivers too. There's a lot going on. I mean, as police officers, we have computers and the radio and phones and all this stuff going on, and the key is that we have to pay attention. We have to arrive where we want to go safely, right? So, but I'll pass over to Officer Teel.
I think you hit exactly what it is. There's also a key component that when I went through elementary school, there was a safety bike riding course that the schools put on. I'm far removed from elementary schools, but I don't think that they have those anymore. There was a lot more the education side of, hey, this is how to ride a bike properly. This is what, I mean, they taught you how to, similar to how we learned how to ride a motorcycle, they put us through a course on how to properly brake, how to properly turn, where to be in the road, when it is appropriate to be on the sidewalk, when it's appropriate to be on the street. There was a lot of things with that. The hand signals, making sure that people understood that the hand signals, what the stopping meant, letting them know why you're turning left and why you're going to turn right. There was a lot of different of the education, but we also, there's an evolving of, we don't just have bicycles, now we have e-bicycles. We have bicycles that aren't just pedal powered, they're electric powered, and they're going far faster than they've ever been. And so I think the other key component to that is parental side of being able to educate. And yeah, kids are going to make those decisions. That's the whole process of being a kid. Sometimes you're going to make a mistake, and that's where you learn. But our job as adults and parents should be how to explain, hey, this is a consequence. This is why we're teaching you this. These are the things of why you don't want to do this. But again, testosterone, kids being kids. When we also were growing up, we had over the ear headphones that were foam. They weren't noise canceling. They weren't things that now I put in my AirPods and I put noise canceling on, and I'm a kid just listening to my music, not hearing traffic around me. So now I'm distracted by that, and I've got a distracted driver, and neither one's paying attention. It's a recipe for utter chaos and disaster, which we've seen. So I think that's the big thing, is going back to the basics of education and saying, hey, you made that mistake, and showing what it is, and maybe creating more courses again, bringing back education side, especially now that we're getting those e-bicycles and these bikes that are going 35 miles an hour with kids on them, that we can't have a driver's license till 16 to operate a vehicle that can go that fast, but now we have a bike that goes sometimes just as fast as a car, but no education on why that should be and why it should change.
Yeah, and those bikes accelerate so quickly too, right? They're so light and those batteries are so powerful. But going back to the education with kids, what about at the point when you have those, your kid's going to start driving? And Lieutenant, you brought up the point, like, you tell your kids you've got to anticipate that the person's going to do the wrong thing. Like, how do you teach your kids, as they start to drive, hey, you've got to anticipate that everybody out there is going to do the wrong thing? But as well, like here in town, I think, when I've tried to teach my children, it's almost like they can't be too passive, because they're going to cause a crash if they're too passive. And they've got to be aggressive, but not so aggressive that they're creating other problems.
They have to be defensive. The defensive driving side to it. Something that I loved that my parents did with me, when I would drive with them, my parents would be like, did you see that happen? The reason why that happened is because I made this mistake, or I wasn't able to do this and this person wanted. So there was always a scenario-based conversation when driving, or even when we rode bikes as a family. My parents were like, hey, we're coming up to the intersection, start looking left, looking right, start paying attention, get off that bike, and this is why. So that there's that part of education with it as well.
Yeah, bridging off that, same thing for me when I was learning, and something that we do in the motorcycle training as an MTO, and also as FTOs, that officers that are just freshly out of the academy, is debriefing. And so I encourage parents that are have kids that are have their instruction permit, and they're riding with their child driving. When you get to your destination, sit down and actually talk. What did you see? What did you see?
Yeah.
And then it's interesting to hear, because the person, and my kids aren't at the driving age yet, but just as a FTO, a field training officer, or as an MTO as well, the person will be like, I don't know, we got here. But while we're riding, well, there was a pedestrian that ran out. There was a pothole. There was, all this stuff that happened. A vehicle made a left in front, and it opens their eyes up. And because you do that and that repetition, you'll see it. They'll get better, and they're starting to pay more attention because most of your drivers are only looking 2 feet in front of the hood, and they have to raise their eyes up, and they're going to see so much more, and they're going to see that car that's pulling out in front of them way far ahead and can let off that accelerator, start that braking process, whether it's a motorcycle or a car. So I definitely encourage parents to do that debrief once you get where you're at. And it doesn't have to be long, 2 minutes, and there's something that you saw that they didn't see, I guarantee. And you're going to see that progression after that 6 months or so that you have that instruction permit and that progression. And it's that learning. And none of us are professional, drivers and motorcycle riders. And even the ones that are, that's what they do. They watch tape and they listen to things. They look at it. Because that's how you get better. We're all learning. So.
Yeah, that's pretty good. No, my son's going through it right now, and whenever we get to where we're at, I'm just happy I'm alive. And that's like,
right?
I don't even want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point, right? That debriefing and what you're talking about, right? Those professionals, whether athletes or professional drivers, right? They're always going back, looking, what happened and reviewing.
And sometimes it's not pretty, but you gotta look through it, right?
Yeah, but those are the good times, right? When it's not pretty and being able
Yes.
to, okay, what happened and recognize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have just, I guess, one last general question. You brought this up, Lieutenant, and that is, when those bad crashes happen, like you're there, right? You're there talking to the family. You're not only on the scene, but you're back at the hospital with the family as well, right? Like, are you able to compartmentalize that, right, and set that aside when you go home, or how do you end up dealing with that?
So interesting enough, I'll give you 2 aspects of it, and then I'll let Officer Teel talk about his experiences. But I have the honor now of being a lieutenant over our fatal team, our 2 teams. And I mean, they're the ones that ultimately respond out after our patrol and our motor officers arrive on scenes of these fatal collisions, and in-depthly, investigating that collision. And in-depthly getting involved with the family in that process and the aftermath of it, the whatever the case direction that it goes as far as prosecution with it, and they're diving completely into it in every case, right? But they have a process, and our department now has developed the Wellness Bureau. To help out as well, but they're a very close-knit team, and it's tough to say that it's easier to disconnect because it's someone that you don't know, but anytime that it's involving juveniles, it's always difficult for everyone involved, and the biggest thing is that for that team specifically, or those 2 teams, is communicating with each other, having outlets, healthy outlets. A lot of them to start playing golf and things like that, and having those friendships and family support to be able to talk about it. And the most difficult, at least for me, is last year we had one of our own officers, and I was the swing shift lieutenant at that time in traffic. We had briefing, and briefing for swing shift starts at 2 p.m. And then I get a phone call at 12:30 in the morning that he lived out in Logandale, and he parked his bike in Northeast Area Command, and on his way home he got hit head on and by a DUI driver and was killed. And so I had to log on and ride my motorcycle all the way out to Logandale, and it was freezing cold, like 20 degrees or so, and there he was on the side of the road and in the car and dead. And 10 hours ago he was alive, and I was making fun of his haircut that he had, because he had kind of a bit of a mullet cut. That was hard. That's one thing as a leader. I always said I never wanted to have to tell a family that their loved one is dead, and his wife was there, and his family and his kids, and it was a long couple weeks for sure, and I can only imagine for their family, and he had friends on his squad that he's super close with too. And it's one of those things that, for me personally, I never had somebody that I knew and or worked with that had been killed in a collision, and I can't say that anymore, you know, and it affected me completely different. And I saw that squad that he worked on, it affected them completely different, and his family and his kids, and all because somebody chose to drive drunk way out into the middle of nowhere and then drive the wrong direction and hit him head on and doing nothing wrong, you know, and it was him that day, and it could have been anybody, but it was him that day. So for me, it's you know, looking out for those officers on that squad and his family and keeping his memory alive within our unit. And he's as far as collision, and even though he was, you know, off duty and driving home and not on his motorcycle, you know, one of only 2 motorcycle officers or traffic officers that have been killed. The other being Mark Carey, and that was by gunfire. You know, and it just it affects you differently when it's your own or your friend or your family, and it affected our section as a whole. I mean, honestly, or our bureau as a whole, because it was one of our own and impacted by something that we are supposed to be preventing from happening. So NSP was the ones that, you know, did the investigation, and that helped out me, honestly, because if it would have been our fatal team, it would have been extremely tough for them. But I know Officer Teel was out there that day too, and was assisting with a lot of things, and our video components and the family and stuff too. But for me, that was, you know, in the 19.5 years, almost 20 years of being a police officer, and, you know, that a person that I knew and you know, really, you know, loved to death every officer that was impacted, you know, that day. So it's tough. It is.
Yeah, especially in something that you're like focused on, right? You've dedicated your career to this, and then lose someone like that.
But for Officer Teel, you know, I'll let him talk about his story.
Yeah, part of my responsibility is going out to the fatals with the fatal team and doing the social media component, and seeing, taking pictures and giving the public a kind of a first glimpse of what they're seeing, what we're seeing on the road. And of course you have to compartmentalize it 100%. You as an officer, you're gonna take that one and you're gonna put it in the back. And there's ones that will affect more. Kids 100% will always, and I say haunt because they will always haunt me, and the aspect of what could we have done to prevent this. What is the preventable side? Where's the enforcement using that aspect of seeing it? But you have to compartmentalize. You have to move on, because yes, we have a person that has lost their life because of a selfish decision most people make, and selfish and reckless decisions. But in order to move on and hopefully reduce and maybe eventually get to 0 fatalities is pushing through that and using their memory to help make things better and pushing for the changes. Because every life that is lost is a life that has been preventable on our roads. And we need to find that balance to make it preventable and show why it's preventable.
Yeah.